All right, so let's begin our discussion.
You gotta roll.
So we need 3 brave volunteers to form our last panel of the night.
I was on the last two.
April,
I like what you
April.
said, so I think you have to go up. What you
April,
just said to all of
April,
us.
April. You look nice. Come on.
No.
Yes, yes, yes.
Of course, if there's someone who hasn't been up, I would especially love to have you.
Angel, you can go. You have some
I think there's 3 people that have never been up.
Yes. Let's go. Come on. He did it. You
I'll
gotta
go
do
if he goes up and says what he just said to
You're
all of
gonna
us.
do just fine. You're gonna do
Okay,
just fine.
we have 2 and 1 more.
Yay for April.
It's on the phone. Oh, whose is this?
There. That one. All right. We need 1 more and we can get started.
Come on, Angel.
Oh, I gotta see on the camera.
No,
No,
come on.
you don't.
Let's see, does anyone who's been up once before want to come up again?
Come on, Cynthia.
Mary, really? I was up already. You
I've been up twice. It's a hot dog.
All right. Thank you to our volunteers.
Thank you, volunteers.
Brief
All right.
introductions.
Yeah. Name's Mike Green. I work here in Placer County and definitely have opinions about illegal immigration.
April, live in Auburn.
Cynthia Lincoln.
Thank you. All right. So this is an interesting topic. We're going to start out with a little poll. Do we feel that America is letting in too many or too few people each year altogether? Putting the whole kitchen sink.
Wait.
Do we have too high level or too low?
Wait, are we talking legal or are we talking illegal?
Both.
Because there's illegal
Total
immigration
levels.
going on right now.
Total level of immigration. Are we letting in too many or too few? So should we?
But we're not letting in some of them. Some of them are just coming, so that's not a, that's
But
not.
some people argue that we need those people for labor.
Yeah.
And we
Some
need them
people
for
say it's
work.
okay.
So
Some
you
people
take
say it's
both.
okay.
The way you have to put it though is, are we letting people stay? Because that's the thing, people who came in here legally are staying, we're allowing them to stay.
Well, we're allowing them to
giving
come
them
back.
things to stay.
And that's part of that
I think
question.
you're talking
That's part of that
a
question.
population problem, which
Yeah.
Elon brings up, and I do agree we have a population problem. I don't think you solve that by just grabbing everybody from around the world and pulling them in, or giving incentives for them to
Yeah.
come in. But
All right. Well, I guess, do we feel that
Too
is
many
illegal
people.
immigration a problem?
Yes.
Illegal.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. What about legal immigration? How is the current levels? We're letting in about 1 million people each year. How do we feel about that?
It's got a problem.
It's a problem?
It's a
Problem.
problem too.
The whole system across the board is broken.
Okay.
Yeah.
How we feel about that? Because I can tell you that, like in my community, more Arden Arcade though, there's been a large Afghan population that's moved in. You know, it's certainly in the schools, they have a lot of need for English language learners, and they came in legally, but many residents aren't necessarily happy about that. So there's different paths, and then of course lots of Ukrainian migrants have come to Sacramento area as well in the wake of the war. In Europe in particular, there's been a huge migrant crisis there. But I can say that in the case of Europe, there's been a different response to Muslim and Ukrainian refugees, and the answer is, are Europeans discriminatory, or does the culture matter in that case? There's a lot of questions that need to be unpacked here as well. We didn't get to that, but certainly issues of culture are part of this issue as well. So I guess just,
Europe doesn't have a constitution, so they're screwed.
there's certainly a lot of
Well,
issues
they're
there
not
for
letting them
sure.
in anymore, from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Most of
Depends on the
countries-
country. UK has
most-
increased immigration,
Right,
but then
UK
in
has.
Sweden, they've actually done a complete reverse, and now there's
Right.
more people leaving than coming in, because they realized that they made some mistakes there. Because
mistakes.
Sweden,
And
they had some
Italy
real
has
issues.
reversed.
And France is not letting them in anymore. A lot of them aren't letting them in anymore.
Yeah, because
Because they've been overwhelmed and like we are right now,
there are. So I guess the first question is,
right?
what should we do about securing our border? What should be the policy there? To the panel.
I just say secure it totally, get the wall, have drones, have everything to stop them from coming over.
What should,
There you go.
what should happen if someone enters the country illegally? They go over the wall, they walk on it. What should happen in that case?
They get thrown right back over.
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing that now?
Because our administration now wants them to vote.
Some,
Without a driver's license and without being legal.
some will
Okay,
argue.
they-
Oh, yes.
They're letting them vote.
So some make the
They're
point
not
that
even
it's
United
too
States
difficult to
citizens.
deport people, right? That there's too many processes. I recently heard though that Pakistan, I think, deported about 1 million people back to Afghanistan, and that's Pakistan we're talking about. They're barely a functional state. So I think the question we have to ask is this a matter of difficulty or is this a matter of will? Does the government want to do this?
Well-
Or bureaucracy as well? Because as you know, there's a lengthy court process that they have to go through. If someone comes into the country illegally, you can't just send them back. They have to get released in the country, then there's a court date, they come in, there's all these different
Yeah,
processes.
but they don't go to
10 years.
court.
Should they have the
They
right to
should-
do that,
No,
or should they
that's
just
what
go back? How do we feel about that?
They should just go back.
Immediately.
Well, I think governments have ways of handling situations even without even building a wall. I think that if we gave our bordering countries an incentive to block the path of these migrant trains, then that could really slow down this problem
Like the
significantly.
Trump stay in
Right,
Mexico.
right, significantly, but
Yeah.
I know that there's economic and other issues having to do with, the immigration and what's, spurring it. But my biggest problem with it is, the cultural one. Because the United States, unlike, it's so huge compared to other countries. I mean, but we were Americans, we were proud to be an American, it meant something to be an American. We had this spirit about us that, if you had the will and the wherewithal, you could make something of yourself. And that was the type of person that we were attracting to our country, that is gonna better our society, and that was interested in becoming a citizen and adapting to our cultural norms. What we're seeing now is an influx of people who not only do not like America, they do not intend to become American or adapt our ways. In fact, they want us to accommodate their ways. And they don't
And we
see,
are.
and they don't see a problem with that. And in many instances, they're getting more rights or have more rights than we do. And that's a problem. And the United States citizen needs to be aware of that, because that's what's happening.
Yeah, if you turned off the financial incentive, turn the financial incentive off, do the wall, physical barrier, and then streamlined our current immigration process, go back to the process of saying, hey, why are you coming in, who's your sponsor, what's your skill set, all that stuff, that would fix so much of it, but there's a lot of money to be made in prolonging the problem and exacerbating the problem. We're fighting internally because we have such differences here, we're not paying attention to,
Well, it kind of reminds me of the war with Afghanistan. I mean, Obama said that we could not do it. The war's never gonna end. Trump got in there in 2 months and it was over. So I think the same with our immigration problem. If we actually really wanted to solve it, we could.
Yeah. And I think a big help with that, I think this is where AI and Elon Musk can come in. We have the Neuralink. They're not gonna miss the court date because they're gonna have Neuralink on.
Plug them in, you got it.
That's an interesting point.
Well, and when people used to be, I had friends that, they were foreign exchange students and they wanted to become, a United States citizen. And they were from Columbia and they became one. I mean, their test was like most of our high school kids could not pass.
Yeah.
And they had to know everything. And I'm like, you had to take that, you had to do this? I mean, to become a United, and they, had to learn all this. When they said the Pledge of Allegiance, when they became a United, that doesn't
Wow.
happen now. You can become a
Yeah.
United States citizen from just skipping over the border.
Well, not a citizen, but there's actually, when you go through the class to become a citizen, to learn about our Constitution, our founding
Right.
fathers, this and that, most people that actually take that serious, they actually know more than our
They
high school
do,
graduates.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me ask you an interesting question about the citizenship. So, in the United States, the law is right now, if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen no matter what. In some cases, this has caused the birth tourism industry. Many pregnant mothers will fly into the United States to give birth, and then their child is a U.S. citizen, which is a pretty big asset to have. You don't maybe think of this if you're an American, but if you're from a poor country, having citizenship in a Western country is a very valuable asset.
It is. It is.
The
For what?
country, the Dominican Republic, used to have this policy. but lots of people from Haiti came over to the Dominican Republic, which is a wealthier country, and got citizenship. So I believe the Supreme Court in the Dominican Republic struck down that policy and abolished that policy of birthright citizenship because they felt it was being abused. So do we believe that anyone born in the US should be a citizen, or should the parents have to be here legally as a resident in order for that citizenship to be passed down? In many European countries, if you're born there, that doesn't automatically make you a citizen, because
That's right.
citizenship is passed down by blood rather than by soil of born there, right? Jus soli, jus sanguine, I think are the two terms, and they're French terms for how citizenship is allocated.
So, should we punish the child for the decision that the mother made? Or should the child be honored of where they were born, and that is their native land? I mean, that's.
But that's
No.
not.
But is that their native land if their parents
Well,
came in
Well,
illegally?
I mean, that's where they're born, you know,
But
so
you're not-
I agree, if they are born here,
I
they
agree.
should get citizenship.
What you need to do is go back and look at why that was put in our Constitution. The reason they put it there was because the founding fathers never thought, it was all about Britain, and anyone who's born here is an American, period. You're not British anymore. That's what it was about.
Right.
It wasn't about people coming here and being born and having anchor babies.
So-
I'm sorry if you don't like that term, but
I
that's
I do
true.
have to fact check one thing.
Yes.
The 14th Amendment was put in place after the Civil War to give citizenship to the freed slaves. That was why it was passed. It was passed during the Reconstruction era. But to that point, though, it was not intended because of immigration. It was
Yeah.
intended for people who had been born in the United
They are
States.
citizens of the United States if they're born here. That's what it was about. Had nothing to do with people coming
But the
from
immigration
somewhere
piece,
else.
you're talking about is what Kennedy put in 65.
Yes.
And we let it go, and we said, oh, it'll be fine, it's not a big deal. And now you've got this situation of
Right.
splitting the kid, right? The Solomon cutting the kid in half.
Right.
It's tragic. I think you've got to pull that out, but I think, that being said, you've also got to put in a clear path to citizenship. I know of so many people that are dying to get here. They love it. They want to be here from everywhere, all over the world, and they'll do anything to get here. It shouldn't cost them an arm and a leg to get in. It shouldn't take them months or years to get in. They shouldn't have to do crazy visa nonsense, right? We should create a method saying, okay, if you really want to come to America and never be able to leave without being taxed, like you can't leave America and not pay taxes in America, just FYI people. You can, here's your path. Here's your way of doing it. Right now, there's tons of bureaucracies that bounce each other.
But that's legal immigration. The illegals are just.
The illegals a mess, yeah.
It's completely different. That's a
Yeah.
completely
But
different animal.
you're-
And they're the people getting the benefits. The
Oh, yeah.
legal immigrants are just, they're like, it's put on the side of the road, or they're taking all the illegals and they're.
What it's doing is
in
setting up a
spring-
war between the kids that aren't in the property ladder, the kids that are gonna be fighting for those jobs and the lack of resources. Because most of the people that are coming in are not women and children and kids,
Right.
it's military age young men, right?
Yes,
So
which
they
is
are gonna
what's
come
here.
in here and then you're gonna be struggle with not having resources. Kids can't get jobs, can't get into houses. The folks that have come in here illegally are going to no longer have welfare benefits. Now what do you have?
And
You
that's
have
what the
true
left
homeless.
wants.
The question
to
is, so
divide us.
what jobs are the American kids going for that the illegal young men are taking? Like, that's the one
Right,
thing.
I don't-
Because almost
Right.
every legal or undocumented person I've ever known, or
Yeah.
who was raised and their family came across illegally, most everyone were picking fruits in Texas to California,
Yeah,
or are out there in the heat building.
yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's right that they came across illegal, but what I am saying is, are any of our citizens gonna go out there and work? Is there, or, like.
Yeah,
like that's
our
paying
citizens
them
need to get
less.
out there and work.
When's
So
the last
I
time
wanted
you
to make a
Paying
point
them
I know, that's like.
about the workers. So America used to have a policy called the Bracero program that allowed citizens from Mexico to come in and work, but then they would go back afterwards. So they weren't coming in as a permanent citizen. Many countries do this. Singapore, they allow lots of people to come in, but they don't get citizenship. They're only coming in to work, they make some money, they go back. You mentioned in 1965 we passed legislation that greatly expanded legal immigration, but at the same time got rid of that program. And that's actually what many point to as the cause for illegal immigration, because we got rid of a worker program that allowed people to come in temporarily, and instead people would come in illegally, but because they came in illegally, they'd never go back. So that's what caused a lot of this tension. There wasn't a lot of tension of people going back and forth. The issue is coming in and staying. I do want to play devil's advocate here, though, because we also mentioned about population, right? So some people are mentioning that in a lot of developed countries, people aren't having as many kids. Now, the United Nations, they created a policy page on this, and they argued that Western nations need to increase immigration in order to balance out their population. The term they use, now people have used this term in other contexts, but this is from the UN document. It's called replacement migration. The idea is you have not enough young people, so you will bring in young people from other countries to effectively expand the population. So Springfield, Ohio, their population had been declining for years, but they had an influx of immigrants, and now their population grew. But many in the city aren't happy about that. They don't like that sudden influx. They don't like the cultural change that's occurred. And I guess that question is, are human beings interchangeable cogs in a machine? Can we let in people from other places? Will it grow our population? Or is that something that's going to gain cultural resistance? You know, what policy should we adopt there? For example, Japan has basically not let in anybody. They let in hardly any people, right? So their population is a little bit lower, but also they don't necessarily have some of these issues too, like that Europe is having.
It's not a little bit
So there's a
lower,
lot
so
of-
they're not
This
gonna be
doesn't work on
around in a
Springfield,
few
Ohio,
years.
because they're only
Yeah.
supposed to be there temporarily.
That's true.
This scenario doesn't work there.
But more often than not, temporary ends up permanent. Germany actually, in the wake of World War II, let in a lot of Turkish guest workers, but they never had the heart to ask them to go back, so they're still there today.
Well, the thing, I watched a whole hour on people of Springfield, Ohio being interviewed. And the one thing that drove me crazy is the guy didn't do his due diligence and go and check out what they're talking about. But they're saying, oh God, yeah, well, one lady's a cashier and she goes, you know, they had their EBT card and I can see their balance. They had a $39,000 balance on their EBT card and they bought $1,300 worth of food. And because they're buying food like crazy because they think it's gonna run out. And so you go, and one guy's like, yeah, there's no bread in the store because they go and buy all the bread. They think it's gonna run out. And it's craziness going on there. And yes, they apparently are eating, they're using, in Haiti, voodoo is the #1 religion. And so they use animals, sacrifices in voodoo, and that's why cats and ducks and geese and all this are disappearing because they need to do their rituals and they're killing off livestock. And one lady's like, yeah, they drove up and they were honking their horn, and we came out and they're like, we want to buy a chicken. We want to buy a chicken. They're like, well, no, we're not, they're not for sale. Well, no, we need it for a girl's birthday. And we're like, no, it's not for sale. And she goes, and it took my husband to come out and run them off, and then they came out the back field and were trying to catch a chicken. So it's amazing what's going on. But this is the thing, when you talk about immigration and allowing people that don't know anything about our culture come in and want to do their own culture. And the people of Springfield are just they're very upset. And it's not about where they're from, it's about what they're doing. Another thing is they don't talk to them at all. They do not socialize, they do not talk to
So I
them.
do want to get it back to the question we were asking, but thank you for bringing up some of those points. Those are some issues that are being discussed right now in our society. But the question I wanted to get back to is, people say we have a population problem, right? Is that solvable through immigration, right? Or can we just bring in more people to substitute for ones who aren't being born? Or in the case of Springfield, is that not working quite right? Do we need to have more kids ourselves? Is it better to take an approach like Hungary? Their leader is a man named Viktor Orban. He passed a law that if I think you have 3 kids, you don't pay any more taxes, right? And he did increase the birth rate of his country. And said because his policy is he wants Hungary to be Hungarian. That's his policy. And some people criticized him for it, but that sounds like a legitimate point, right? So you had a hand up there.
Oh, that was just a past point. I was just gonna say, this voodoo stuff been going on for hundreds of years. They do it on like wildlife reserves in the middle of the night. It's always going on. It's getting exposed now, so that is the good thing.
Thank you for your point, but
Is there an example of when like the United States has had programs where they've like, invested resources in having people come over to grow the population? Have we ever done this before?
I don't think so.
you mean immigration or
Yeah, immigration.
births? I mean,
Immigration.
we always had some amount of immigration.
Right, but have
Yeah.
we ever had done what the UN is saying, like in our past, like they're like, oh, we need the population to grow, let's invite, people from this part of the world and just.
Right now, we're letting in 1 million people every year to grow the population. It maybe isn't directly due to the UN, but that is the current policy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the UN should be telling us anything.
I agree with that.
Why has the population gone down? Number one, they're feeding us, our food is poison, most of the food we eat is poison, and it does sterilize kids. Okay, and all those shots those kids are getting, those two. But the next thing you need to look at is, okay, so if I have chickens, and if I don't have enough food to feed my chickens are gonna die, okay? And they're not gonna make as many eggs, and I won't have as many more chickens. We are being killed financially. My kids cannot have kids because they can't afford them. Okay, and that's the way they think of it. I'm like, no, you can always afford a kid. But kids are not having kids because they can't afford them. They'll have one instead of 3.
But that
or
goes back to
4.
what he's saying, and I disagree with that. I tell my kids, I have 4, that I hope that they each have 6.
Yes.
I want a ton of kids.
Yes,
And
but that's-
and as
but that's
a
the
grandpa, I'll be over there babysitting, changing
Yes,
diapers, doing all that
yes.
stuff.
But-
I think that's the
but-
circle of life and that's
If
healthy.
you look, I think back to when I was raising my kids and what how far the dollar went.
So that's a bigger problem.
That's the
But
thing.
you're, that being said, do you have all the goodies that your kids had?
No, but that's,
So
yes.
it's an expectation, like we were talking about technology earlier, right? When I first started, HP, old grizzled engineer, I was so excited, I got my first degree, I was like, yeah, this is great, technology's wonderful, it's gonna save us all. And this old grizzled engineer's like, no, it makes us lazy and stupid. And we've become accustomed to these things, we carry around these $1,000 phones, these really nice cars, all this incredible stuff, when we didn't, and you go back a couple generations, you didn't have shoes in the summer. You got shoes in the winter for church and for school.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you have to have an approach that allows for folks to come in. This is not a British country, it's a total melting pot, and it's awesome. It is so awesome. If you've never gotten out and met everybody, I've been all over, and if you never heard somebody speak Cajun, you've got to go check that out. It's cool. And all over the world, people are super, super nice.
Well,
super
we
cool.
are a melting pot, and I lived in New York, and I worked in Brooklyn, and I think that's the most unique cities, because every section was a different ethnicity
Yeah.
that they were very proud of, but at the end of the day, they were all proud to be in America and to be Americans. And that's the problem that we have now, is that cultural,
I'm proud to be
You know,
but it's-
an American.
that's-
Yeah, it used to be, we had.
no, it's not.
No,
Well, it was,
No,
but.
but what I'm saying, they're teaching not to love America in
Yeah, yeah,
school.
yeah.
They're telling
Oh,
people.
yeah, you don't have to say the Pledge of
You
Allegiance.
Well,
got, you got a
okay.
question back here. She's been
Yes.
following.
So all of you have said that the increase in immigration is because we're lacking in our population. Is that an official stance
Yeah.
of the government? We're
Yes,
letting all
well-
these people
Well, how come
in
all
So
they
much
do
of
is
it is
say-
because it's different things, right? Because
That-
there's different ethnic lobbies. Like for example, I heard a story that President Clinton, they were considering lowering immigration in the 90s, but I believe he met with a lobbying group for Asian Americans that did not support that policy, and then that policy was scrapped. So there's different kind of lobbying groups that do support certain policies that they see as beneficial themselves. Also, business interests tend to like immigrants to come in because oftentimes they are willing to work harder for less than native-born American citizens. So there are different groups within
But
the
don't
policy.
just breeze over that, because
Yeah.
it's in the business interests to have a ton of people to drop the wages in the floor.
That's true, supply and
So
demand,
your
right?
kids are not gonna have an
Yeah.
opportunity because the border's been flooded.
So our
If they
current
don't-
administration is letting everybody in because we're lacking population?
I
No.
don't believe
No,
that.
so-
Well, there are
That's
different
a lie.
perspectives on this. People might disagree.
So why,
People might
yeah,
disagree on that.
why are they letting everybody in?
Votes.
Motor voter.
You think it's for
because
votes?
there's motor
Votes?
voters.
There population, there are studies about the fact that, and I'm sorry ladies, I'm with you on this, but all the countries where women have been emancipated, guess what happens? Once women go out to work, the population goes down, and it's gone down significantly. And everything, they're not having children. If you look at the numbers, they're waiting till like their 30s to even get married, then start to try to have children. We all know what happens then. You've waited too long, and besides the poisons and everything else, it's just biologically harder to have children in your late 30s. Or they're opting not to have them at all. The numbers are staggering.
So every country, when the median age of marriage, it's above 28, has civil war, and we're at 29. So it's the longer you put off getting married, having kids, getting involved, living in that ramshackle shack, and doing what everybody does to get up and going, the harder it gets, and the more animosity you get, being divided and thinking, oh, it's them, it's that, it's a group or whatever.
I will say I did my capstone project in college about the birth rate and population, and what I can say certainly we're debating that moving people around when the real question is why aren't people having as many kids? Because right now, you might be surprised to know that in the country of Mexico, the birth rate has fallen below replacement. The same thing in Brazil, the same thing in India. People used to say these were baby factories, they're having so many kids. Now they're not. Right now, there's two parts of the world that have a high birth rate. Africa and the Islamic world, the Muslim world, Muslim countries. Those places are quite poor, right? Niger is a country in West Africa that has the highest birth rate in the world. I think their GDP per capita is under $1,000. So clearly, a lot of it's about culture, right, and expectations. A lot of it is that nowadays you have to do all the soccer games and the electronics and have 3 cars and a nice big house, while people in these countries live in huts, but they have 5, 6, 7, 8 kids.
And they're
Their
happy.
population is growing. So it's about, a lot of it's cultural. We have to accept that. Israel is the only developed, like highly developed westernized country to have an above replacement birth rate. People say housing is expensive. In Israel, housing is incredibly expensive. It's a tiny little country, and they have lots of kids because it's ingrained in their culture to have a large family. There's a lot of reasons for that. Some people say it even goes back to the Holocaust, right? They were nearly wiped out as an ethnic group. There are so many factors. The current conflicts there, it's a religious country, right? There's different contexts there. But I think we do have to ask the question, is something wrong in our culture of why people aren't having those families? And is it economic? Again, I tend to say it's more cultural. But I think obviously we kind of went into some different issues, but really it is about population, right, at the end of the day, and the family. So I just wanted to give a little context on there because it's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
You look at those cultures too, and you also look at their mental health. Their Native Americans never had stuttering, right? They didn't run into that until Europeans came over. And you find out, oh, this educated folk have an issue communicating. Why is that? Well, because they got a million things rattled around in their brain. So we've got to get back to doing this. In technology, we found this. So Y2K, we ramped up in technology. We were working like 10, 12, 14-hour days. And everybody in technology had this big aha where we said, holy smokes, we're in front of a screen too much. We've got to get out and do something. And did pottery, did biking, hiking, fishing, whatever. I got into beekeeping. So we all realized we got to get back to the earth. We got to get back to our environment and taking care of it, caring, being a part of it, so detached. But it's the same thing. If folks are coming over here legitimately and they need an avenue, I don't believe it's a replacement of the birth rate. If that is the issue, that's a big problem worldwide.
Yeah.
I think it's more nefarious than that. But if you need to change your culture, you're going to have to start in the family and grassroots.
And
This-
schools.
Schools are a big thing, but they're not going to be as important as your family, as what you've got
Right.
at home. That culture, it's.
But then they get
critical.
lost when they go to school. Unless they're like in a charter or
They
something
can,
like that.
but you're, as
because
a
you got-
parent, you're putting in the time. If you're not completely addicted to all the shiny new stuff, and you're saying, okay, I'm gonna
Right.
have the beat up old car, and I'm gonna get a couple more times with my daughter, you're gonna do better. And you can
Right.
see that result as they go through a wonderful middle school, 6, 7, 8. I'm so glad I didn't go. I don't know how you guys did it. I would have been horrified. they can adjust because now they're actually having to put mommy, daddy's, ideas into practice and adjusting it in their society. And if they have that reassurance of, oh wait, this is what mom said, but I gotta adjust it, it helps them grow up and become functioning adults so that when you really need them, when you're not able to take care of yourself, they're there and they're healthy and happy and they can say, hey, mom, dad,
Right.
I'm here, I can take care of you. That crises like this are gonna lead to all of these elderly, aged and disabled that are in these homes and they've got nobody. If you wanna see some scary stuff, go to an ER or go to a hospital and see how many people are there without an advocate, by themselves. It's
Right.
frightening. And unfortunately, we didn't take care of ourselves enough to build that.
Thank you for your point, appreciated it. It is getting a little bit later, so do we have any closing remarks on kind of what we've been talking about?
We're good?
You got a closing remark?
Oh,
Anyone want the last word?
No, I thank everyone for coming. I thought we had some really good discussions. I think all of you guys had either some good comments or questions or information that you brought to the forum. I do think that this is important. I think that our voices are important. And I just hope that anybody out there seeing this, you do this in your own community, because it's time for us to take back our communities and make them what we want, and let our representatives know that they work for us and not the other way around. And this is the way it can happen, when they hear what we want, what we think, because nobody's asking me, and I think that it's important. Thank you.
Thank you all,
Question.
appreciate it. Yes,
Session number 3, are we graced with the presence of the same moderator?
I plan on it.
All right.